Ever wondered how someone could meet their end in the most ridiculous way possible? From people who died trying to show off to those who simply made the wrong choice at the wrong time, these stories will have you laughing and cringing at the same time. Get ready for a wild ride of absurd and unexpected deaths that are almost too silly to believe. Don't miss 1 hour of people who died in extremely silly ways.
It was August 7th, 1997, in Buxton, North Carolina, a small village on Hatteras Island. Daniel Jones, a 21-year-old student from Woodbridge, Virginia, was on summer break, enjoying a beach day with his girlfriend, Julie Baker. Daniel was curious and adventurous, passionate about the outdoors. He studied at Northern Virginia Community College and worked as a computer systems engineer. On this day, he was doing something he had loved since childhood, digging in the sand. Daniel had been on Hatteras Island for a week with Julie. The couple had been together for 4 years, having met in high school, and they planned to marry. Julie often joined Daniel on his beach outings, and this time was no different. She watched him dig a large hole in the sand, capturing the moment on her video camera. The hole Daniel dug was unusually deep, around 9 feet deep and 8 feet wide. He had spent most of the morning digging, likely enjoying the cooler temperature, and break from the wind inside the hole. Nearby beachgoers saw Daniel digging and assumed he was having fun. They didn't think much of it. Around 1:50 p.m., tragedy struck. The whole walls collapsed, burying Daniel under several feet of sand. Julie screamed for help, and people nearby rushed over. Panic quickly set in as they realized how dangerous the situation had become. The sand was heavy and packed tightly, trapping Daniel underneath. Tourists, locals, and rescue workers immediately started digging. They used anything they could find, from their hands to plastic toy shovels. Even Ollie Jarvis, the owner of a nearby tackle shop, handed out shovels to people trying to help. More than 200 people gathered, working together in a desperate attempt to save Daniel. Unfortunately, the sand collapsed into the hole, making it harder to reach him. It took nearly an hour before the rescue team uncovered Daniel's head. They placed an oxygen mask over his face, but it was too late. Daniel was pronounced dead at Hatteras Island Medical Center. The cause of death was suffocation. The news of Daniel's tragic death spread quickly, shocking those who knew him. His mother, Mary Ann Jones, spoke about Daniel's love for digging, recalling that it was something he had done since childhood. He always loved playing in the sand, but never dug that deep, she shared. Daniel wasn't just a regular beachgoer. He was also an Eagle Scout, known for his kindness and dedication to helping others. He regularly volunteered at a homeless shelter in Washington, D.C., handing out sandwiches every Friday night. His death left a deep void in the hearts of many who knew and loved him. Julie Baker, his girlfriend, was devastated. The couple had shared dreams of the future, and Daniel's sudden death shattered those plans. Friends and family gathered to mourn the loss of a young man with so much potential, whose life was cut tragically short. Locals and tourists alike questioned why Daniel had dug such a deep hole. Carol Dillon, owner of the Outer Banks Motel where Daniel had been staying, remembered his kind and friendly demeanor. "He was like a ray of sunshine," she said. Ryan Dawson, a 19-year-old from Buxton who helped in the rescue, expressed his grief over the tragedy. "I was just hoping he'd be alive when we got him out," he said, saddened by the outcome. Daniel Jones's tragic death shows the hidden dangers of everyday activities. Although seemingly harmless, digging deep holes in the sand can turn deadly when the walls collapse. Despite the overwhelming effort from those around him, Daniel could not be saved, leaving his family and friends to grieve the loss of a bright and caring young man. It was the evening of September 2008 in Edlington, South Yorkshire, England. Andrew Lee, a 33-year-old aspiring chef and forklift driver, had decided to participate in a daring challenge. Known for his love of cooking, Andrew wanted to test his limits with an incredibly spicy chili sauce. Cooking was more than a hobby for Andrew. He was passionate about trying new recipes and dreamed of someday becoming a chef in France. His room was filled with cookbooks, and he often created new dishes. On this particular evening, Andrew made a bet with his girlfriend's brother, Michael. The challenge was simple but risky, to see who could handle eating the hottest chili sauce. Andrew's father had grown the peppers used in the sauce, specially cultivated for the contest. With their plates ready, Andrew and Michael began the challenge. They ate the sauce with nachos, and Andrew added it to a plate of pasta. This was no ordinary sauce. It was made from some of the hottest peppers available. Even for someone like Andrew, who regularly used chili in his cooking, this was beyond what he had ever tried. At first, both men experienced the expected intense heat. Their faces turned red, and sweat poured down their skin. The sauce was overwhelming, but Andrew powered through. However, soon after the contest, Andrew started to feel an unusual itching sensation, which concerned him, but not enough to seek help immediately. As the night continued, Andrew's discomfort worsened. By 2:30 a.m., he went to bed at his girlfriend Samantha Bailey's house, still feeling the itch. Samantha, who had 4 children, tried to comfort him by scratching his back until he finally fell asleep. The next morning, Samantha woke up to a nightmare. Andrew was unresponsive, lying still in bed. She called for an ambulance, but despite the paramedics' best efforts, Andrew was declared dead at the scene. His sudden death shocked everyone. Andrew had been a healthy man and had recently passed a full medical examination at work. No one could understand how a simple chili eating contest could have such a tragic outcome. An inquest was launched and a post-mortem examination was conducted, but it didn't provide a clear cause of death. To further investigate, toxicology tests were ordered to see if the chili sauce could have caused a fatal reaction. Medical experts explained that allergic responses to chili peppers are rare, but possible. Capsaicin, the compound that makes chilies hot, has some health benefits, but can also cause serious issues in large amounts. Andrew's mother, Pamela, was devastated by her son's sudden death. She described him as a healthy, ambitious man who loved cooking and couldn't understand how such a normal activity could end in such a tragedy. The family waited anxiously for answers, hoping the toxicology results would clarify. This event raised awareness of the potential dangers of consuming extremely spicy foods. Health experts warned against the trend of breeding hotter and hotter chili varieties, noting that even mild reactions can include burning eyes, a runny nose, and hiccups. In rare cases, severe reactions can lead to more serious complications, including heart issues, which might have happened in Andrew's case. Though the exact cause of his death remains unclear, it's evident that the ultra-hot chili sauce played a significant role. Andrew's love for cooking and willingness to take on culinary challenges ended unexpectedly and heartbreakingly. What if Andrew had decided to skip the challenge that night? What if he had seen the itching as a sign to get medical help? These lingering questions show us the risks that sometimes come with even the most innocent activities.
It was July 4th, 2015 in Calais, Maine, near the Canadian border. Devin Staples, a 22-year-old from Orlando, Florida, celebrated Independence Day with friends and family. Devin, who had worked as characters like Gaston and Goofy at Disney World, was known for his fun-loving personality. The usual fireworks, laughter, and drinks festered that evening. Devin, known for his sense of humor, played around with a fireworks mortar tube, unaware that a tragic mistake was about to happen. The group was lighting fireworks throughout the night. At some point, Devin picked up the fireworks mortar tube and placed it on his head. His friends, thinking he was joking, tried to convince him to stop. Within seconds, Devin lit the firework, which exploded instantly, killing him. His brother Cody was nearby and described the scene as devastating, noting that nothing could be done to save Devin. The news of Devin's death shocked everyone who knew him. His family emphasized that Devin wasn't reckless. His brother mentioned that Devin often pretended to do silly things for laughs but never intended to hurt himself. This time, however, a joke turned into a deadly accident. Devin's mother, Kathleen Staples, believes Devin thought the firework was inactive. She told CBS News that Devin assumed it didn't work and placed it on his head as part of his playful nature. But once the fuse ignited, there was no time to react. His fiancée, Cara Hawley, who was present that night, explained that Devin was likely buzzed from alcohol and might have accidentally lit the firework. She recalled yelling at Devin when she saw the fuse was lit, but it was too late. The firework was a reloadable mortar tube meant to explode into the sky. Its exact type is unknown, but its power was strong enough to kill Devin immediately. His death shows the dangers associated with fireworks, which cause many injuries and fatalities, especially around holidays like the 4th of July. Psychologists suggest that young adults like Devin are more prone to risky behavior due to peer pressure and the desire to impress others. Dr. Art Markman from the University of Texas, Austin, explained that the brain's frontal lobes, responsible for controlling impulses, fully develop in the mid-20s, making young adults more likely to take risks. Devin's history as a fun-loving entertainer might have contributed to his decision to place the fireworks on his head. Alcohol likely contributed to Devin's poor decision-making that night. It impairs judgment, making it harder to recognize danger. Devin might not have realized the risk of putting a live firework on his head, believing it was a harmless prank. After Devin's tragic death, his mother began advocating for stricter fireworks regulations in Maine. The state had only legalized fireworks in 2012 after a 60-year ban. Devin's death was the first fatality since fireworks became legal. Kathleen argued that fireworks should be regulated similarly to firearms or vehicles, emphasizing their potential danger. State Representative Michel Lajoie echoed her concerns, suggesting stricter rules for fireworks use, though he acknowledged that it's hard to prevent every accident. Devin's family and friends remember him as a kind, energetic person who loved to make others smile. He had planned to become a veterinary technician and start classes later that year. His love for animals and his joyful spirit are how his loved ones want him to be remembered. To honor his memory, his brother Cody encouraged people to do something nice for someone and show love in his name. July 9, 1993, in Toronto, Canada. Gary Hoy, a 38-year-old lawyer, was preparing for a special event. His law firm, Holden Day Wilson, was hosting a reception for students interested in internships. The gathering took place on the 24th floor of the Toronto Dominion Bank Tower, a high-rise in the city's financial district. Gary, a respected corporate lawyer, was excited to meet the students and give them a tour of the office. However, what started as a normal day became a tragedy that would be remembered for years. Gary wasn't just known for his legal expertise. He had a reputation for an unusual stunt. He would run into the office windows to show their strength, bouncing off to prove they wouldn't break. Over the years, Gary had done this countless times without any issues. His colleagues and visitors often found it amusing, and Gary took pride in pulling off the demonstration. That day, Gary decided to show the trick again to the students. Confident as always, he threw himself at the window, and just like before, the glass held and he bounced back. But for reasons unknown, Gary wasn't satisfied and decided to do it again. This time, things went wrong. Instead of bouncing off like before, the window gave way. It didn't shatter, but it popped out of its frame, sending Gary falling 24 stories to his death in the courtyard below. He died instantly from the impact. The students and colleagues who witnessed the accident were shocked. What was supposed to be a simple demonstration had turned into a fatal accident in a matter of seconds. Emergency services arrived quickly, but they could do nothing to save Gary. His death left everyone in disbelief. Authorities and engineers were called to investigate. The glass itself hadn't broken. It had simply come out of its frame. Structural engineer Bob Greer later explained that no window frame could withstand the repeated force of a grown man throwing himself against it. While the glass held, the frame failed, leading to the tragic fall. News of Gary's death spread quickly throughout the city. People couldn't comprehend how such a thing could happen. Gary wasn't reckless or trying to harm himself. He repeated something he had done many times before. Yet this time it led to his untimely death. Gary's colleagues were devastated. Hugh Kelly, another lawyer at the firm, described Gary as a brilliant lawyer and a kind person who would be deeply missed. The tragedy shook the firm, once one of the most prestigious in Canada. A crisis team was brought in to help employees cope, but the emotional toll remained evident. In the years following Gary's death, the firm began to decline. Many believed the trauma of losing Gary contributed to Holden Day Wilson's eventual downfall. By 1996, the firm had closed its doors, marking one of the biggest law firm failures in Canadian history. Gary's death became part of Toronto's history. It was so unusual that many people thought it was just an urban legend, but the facts were clear. His story was featured in media, including the film The Darwin Awards, the show 1000 Ways to Die, and an episode of Mythbusters. Online forums even debated the event, with some questioning whether it was real. But there was no denying the truth. A man lost his life in a bizarre, tragic accident. It was January 2, 2001, in Budapest, Hungary. Jimmy Zombo, a 42-year-old pop star, spent the evening at home with his wife and friends, drinking and enjoying their company. Zombo, widely known as the King, had become a legend in Hungary. His career was thriving, with millions of records sold, and his recent album, Christmas with Jimmy, was topping the charts. He seemed to have it all. That night, he was peaceful until early morning when Zombo became annoyed by a neighbor's rooster disturbing his sleep. Frustrated, he decided to scare it off with his 9mm Beretta. As an experienced gun owner and hunter, he didn't think twice. He fired 2 shots from a window, and the noise quieted the rooster. Relieved, he returned inside, confident the matter was resolved. Zombo removed the magazine and prepared to show it was empty to reassure his wife that the gun was safe. However, he missed a critical detail. A bullet was still in the chamber. In a moment of carelessness, Zombo raised the gun to his head and pulled the trigger. The gun went off, and the bullet struck him in the temple. Panic ensued as his wife and friends rushed to help him. They called for an ambulance, and he was taken to the hospital in critical condition. Sadly, despite efforts to save him, Jimmy Zambo was pronounced dead hours later. News of his sudden death spread quickly, leaving fans and the country in shock. At first, rumors of taking his own life circulated, but a police investigation confirmed it was a tragic accident. Zambo, slightly intoxicated but not heavily drunk, had misjudged the situation, leading to the fatal shooting. For Hungary, the loss of Jimmy Zambo was hard to process. Born in 1958 as Imre Zambo, he had worked his way up from humble beginnings, starting in the state radio children's choir. After performing in the United States, he returned to Hungary in the 1980s, where his career took off. His albums went platinum, and he was even named Hungary's Singer of the Year in 1993. By his death, he hosted a popular TV show and had secured his place as the face of Hungarian pop music. As the details of his death became public, grief spread across the country. Fans gathered outside his home, lighting candles and laying flowers. Many were visibly heartbroken, mourning the man who had brought so much joy to their lives. His house became a shrine, with people leaving tributes in his memory. On January 5th, just days after his death, Zambo's body was laid out for public viewing at a Greek Catholic church on Sheppel Island. Over 30,000 people came to pay their respects. The next day, tens of thousands more lined the streets for his funeral. It was a grand, emotional event unlike anything Hungary had ever seen. Black horses drew his coffin, and mourners watched in disbelief as the procession passed by. The Mass, broadcast live on TV, showed Zambo's family flanked by 30 bodyguards, helping them through the massive crowd. Thousands of doves were released during the ceremony as his coffin was lowered into the ground. A crown was placed on a red cushion next to him, a final tribute to the man known as the King. Fans, some having traveled hundreds of kilometers, stood by, overwhelmed with grief. His death left a significant void in Hungarian pop culture that would be difficult to fill. Jimmy Zambo's life resonated with many, especially those who had lived through tough times in Hungary during the 1990s. His music provided comfort, joy, and a sense of unity. Even after his death, Zambo's legacy continues. His home remains a place of pilgrimage, and fellow musicians have recorded tribute songs in his honor. His albums still sell, and his influence on Hungarian pop culture remains strong. Jimmy Zambo was more than just a singer. To his fans, he symbolized hope, joy, and connection. It was 1995 in Poland, and a tragic and bizarre event occurred that left the entire country stunned. Krzysztof Ozninski, a 30-year-old farmer, lost his life in a shocking attempt to prove his manliness. Krzysztof was known in his village as a strong and hard-working man. He spent most of his days tending to his farm, doing the tough physical labor that defined his life. Like many men in his community, Krzysztof enjoyed spending his evenings with friends, sharing drinks, and talking about life. On one cold winter night, what began as a normal gathering among friends turned into something much darker. That evening, Krzysztof and his friends met in a small barn on his property. The group was drinking heavily, and as the night wore on, their conversation took a dangerous turn. It wasn't unusual for them to play what they called men's games, but these games were far from harmless. They were competitive, risky, and fueled by a need to prove who was the toughest among them. The night started with the men hitting each other on the head with frozen turnips. It was painful, but in their minds it was a test of strength and endurance. Laughter echoed through the barn, but underneath it there was a tension, a silent competition that no one wanted to lose. They were driven by pride, each man trying to show he could take more pain than the others. But things took a terrifying turn when one of Christoph's friends decided to up the stakes. He grabbed a chainsaw that had been lying around and, in a shocking move, cut off the end of his own foot. The barn fell silent as the reality of what he had done sank in. Blood poured from his wound, but instead of stopping the madness, it seemed to urge the others to do more. Christoph, feeling the pressure not to be outdone, made a decision that would cost him his life. In his drunken state, he believed he had to prove that he was even tougher than his friend. He took the chainsaw, looked at his friends, and shouted, "Watch this then!" With those words, he swung the chainsaw at his own head. The scene that followed was horrifying. The chainsaw cut through Christoph's neck, severing his head from his body. He died instantly, his body collapsing to the ground as his friends watched in shock and disbelief. The reality of what had just happened hit them hard. Their friend was dead, and nothing could bring him back. The news of Krzysztof Asninski's death quickly spread beyond the village. People couldn't believe the lengths he had gone to in order to prove his manhood. It reminds us of how dangerous it can be when pride and alcohol mix. Krzysztof's story became widely known, and it wasn't long before it was included in a study published in the British Medical Journal. This study looked at people who had died in foolish ways and found that the majority were men. The researchers suggested that men are often more willing to take unnecessary risks to prove themselves, especially when alcohol is involved. Krzysztof's death was also mentioned in connection with the Darwin Awards, a darkly humorous honor given to people who die in the most foolish ways, effectively removing themselves from the gene pool. His story stood out as one of the most extreme examples of toxic masculinity and the deadly consequences it can have. Looking back at what happened that night, it's impossible not to wonder what could have been different. What if Krzysztof and his friends hadn't been drinking so much? What if someone had stopped the games before they got out of hand? Could Krzysztof's life have been saved if someone had intervened? These questions don't have easy answers, but they remind us of the importance of making better choices and looking out for each other. Krzysztof Asninski's death is a tragic example of how a desire to prove one's manliness can lead to disaster. It's a story that forces us to think about the pressures men face to appear tough and how dangerous those pressures can be. In the end, no amount of pride is worth the cost of a life. In August 2014, a chef named Peng Fan, who worked in Foshan, Guangdong province in China, tragically died in an unusual way. Peng was preparing a dish that included the meat of an Indo-Chinese spitting cobra, a snake known for its deadly venom. This dish is considered a delicacy in some parts of Asia. That day, Peng had already severed the snake's head and was busy preparing the rest of its body to cook a soup. The snake's head was set aside as Peng focused on his work. About 20 minutes later, Peng went to throw the snake's head into the trash, thinking it was no longer dangerous. But to his shock, the severed head suddenly bit his hand, injecting him with venom. The venom of the Indo-Chinese spitting cobra is extremely powerful. It contains neurotoxins that attack the nervous system, causing paralysis and eventually stopping the victim from breathing. In Peng's case, the venom started affecting him almost immediately. He had no time to react or get help before his respiratory system began to shut down. The diners in the restaurant were enjoying their meals, unaware of what was happening in the kitchen. But then they heard loud screams and a lot of noise coming from the back. Restaurant guest Lin's son, who was there celebrating his wife's birthday, later described the chaos. "We were eating when suddenly there was a lot of noise. We didn't know what was going on but could hear people screaming from the kitchen." Realizing something was terribly wrong, the restaurant staff called for a doctor. Unfortunately, by the time medical help arrived, it was too late. Peng Fan had already died from the venom. The speed at which the venom worked left little time for anyone to save him, and without anti-venom, there was nothing that could be done. A police spokesman described the event as a highly unusual case, explaining that once the venom took hold, there was no chance of saving Peng's life. Only the anti-venom could have helped, but it wasn't given in time. It was just a tragic accident. Experts later explained how this could happen. Yang Hong Chang, a snake expert with 40 years of experience, said that reptiles, including snakes, can still move for a short time after their body parts are removed, or even after they are decapitated. When a snake's head is cut off, it's technically dead because its basic body functions stop, but reflexes can still happen, he said. This means that even after being killed, the snake's head can still bite and inject venom, which is exactly what happened to Peng. The Indo-Chinese spitting cobra, the type of snake Peng was handling, is especially dangerous because of its venomous bite and its ability to spit venom with great accuracy. This snake's venom can cause severe damage and even death, as seen in Peng's case. Despite being decapitated, the snake's reflexes allowed it to bite and kill Peng, showing just how dangerous these creatures can be even after death. In some parts of Asia, snake meat is believed to have health benefits, and it is often used in traditional medicine. In Guangdong province, where Peng worked, snake meat has been eaten for centuries and is considered a delicacy. It is believed to cure various ailments and strengthen the body. This belief, however, doesn't eliminate the very real dangers involved in preparing and consuming such dangerous animals. The restaurant where Peng worked was left in shock after his death. The diners who were there that day will likely never forget the tragedy that unfolded in the kitchen. What began as an ordinary meal ended with the sudden loss of a life.
August 14th, 2010, a warm Saturday morning in Kentucky. Kalita Nicole Hicks, a 20-year-old from Olive Hill, was driving down Country Road 519 in her Chevy. Kalita lived with her parents, John and Janice Abney Hicks. She also had a brother, Jeremy Clayton, and a sister, Stephanie Campbell. That day, Kalita and her passenger decided to make a dangerous move. They planned to switch seats while the car was still moving. Kalita's Chevy had an open T-top, and they believed this would make the swap possible. Their idea was for Kalita to climb onto the roof, while her passenger slid into the driver's seat. Kalita began to pull herself onto the roof of the speeding car, but things took a fatal turn. As she climbed, she lost her balance. Her foot hit the steering wheel, causing the vehicle to swerve. Her passenger tried to regain control by grabbing the wheel, but Kalita had already fallen out of the car. As she fell, Kalita hit a guardrail at a high speed, suffering catastrophic injuries. She was rushed to the University of Kentucky Medical Center in Lexington, where she underwent surgery, but she could not be saved. Kalita passed away later that morning. The Fayette County Coroner's Office confirmed that her injuries from the fall were the cause of her death. Her death was not only tragic, but entirely avoidable. The reckless decision to switch seats while the car was moving cost Kalita her life. Meanwhile, despite avoiding further disaster, the passenger faced legal consequences. He was arrested and charged with driving on a suspended license, improper registration, and having no insurance. Kalita's sudden death devastated her family. Her parents, John and Janice, were left heartbroken. Her siblings, Jeremy and Stephanie, struggled to cope with the loss. Her grandparents, Alfred and Mary Shrum Hicks, along with the rest of her family and friends, mourned the tragic accident. On August 17, 2010, Kalita was laid to rest. Her funeral took place at Globe Funeral Chapel in Olive Hill, Kentucky. Kalita was buried in the Hicks family cemetery on Garvin Ridge in Olive Hill, surrounded by her grieving loved ones. Kalita's story later appeared in the Darwin Awards, a platform highlighting deaths resulting from reckless behavior. The Rydam Cowgirl entry labeled Kalita's death as a cautionary story, a harsh lesson about the dangers of risky actions. There are many lessons to be learned from this tragedy. Most importantly, it shows the dangers of not taking road safety seriously. Attempting dangerous stunts while driving can have dire consequences. While Kalita's passenger tried to prevent a worse outcome by grabbing the wheel, his irresponsible decision, driving on a suspended license, contributed to the situation. Kalita's death forces us to reflect on how things could have gone differently. What if they had simply pulled over to switch seats safely? What if they had considered the potential consequences before taking such a risk? Kalita Nicole Hicks, born in 1989, lost her life at just 20 years old due to a single impulsive decision. Her death tells us the importance of road safety, leaving her family and community to grieve the loss of a young woman with so much ahead of her. It was November 30th, 2004, in Kent, Washington. Philip Quinn, a 24-year-old man, was found dead in his trailer home after a tragic accident involving a lava lamp. Known for his curiosity, Philip was excited to try out his new lava lamp, a decorative item popular for the gentle movement of wax inside. These lamps heat the wax with a bulb, causing it to rise and fall inside a glass container. The lamp is designed to operate at around 60 degrees Celsius or 140 degrees Fahrenheit, with the wax melting slowly under the gentle heat of a 40-watt bulb. Philip's eagerness to see the lamp in action led to a fatal mistake. Philip grew impatient when the lava lamp didn't start working as quickly as he expected. Instead of waiting, he placed the lamp on his kitchen stove to speed up the process. This decision turned deadly, as the lamp's glass container was not built to handle the direct heat from a stove. The intense heat rapidly overheated the liquid and wax inside the bottle, causing them to expand faster than they were designed to. The wax, which normally rises and falls in a slow cycle, was now heating uncontrollably. Lava lamps are meant to function under controlled temperatures, and the stove's heat pushed the temperature far beyond safe limits. As the pressure inside the glass bottle grew, the lamp's structure couldn't contain it. Within moments, the bottle exploded. A large shard of glass from the lava lamp was propelled through the air with force, striking Philip directly in the chest. The glass pierced his heart, causing a fatal injury. In shock and immense pain, Philip managed to stumble into his bedroom before collapsing. His parents later found him lying dead on the floor, with the remains of the lava lamp scattered across the kitchen. Investigators quickly ruled out foul play or substance use. They determined that Philip's death was the result of an unfortunate accident caused by his impatience. Had he followed the safety guidelines provided with the lamp, the tragedy could have been avoided. During the investigation, police noted the burnt and shattered remains of the lava lamp in the kitchen. It was clear that Philip had tried to speed up the process by using the stove, leading to the explosion. Experts pieced together what likely happened. The wax inside the bottle finally began to move just before the glass container shattered from the excessive heat, sending deadly shards flying. The incident drew public attention, reminding everyone of the importance of following product safety instructions. Lava lamp manufacturers warn against placing the lamps near direct heat sources like stoves, as this poses a significant risk of overheating and explosion. Philip Quinn's death was even investigated by the popular TV show Mythbusters in 2006. In episode 17, the team attempted to recreate the circumstances of his death. They heated a lava lamp on an electric hot plate and used a human ribcage replica to simulate the effect. Their experiment confirmed that the lava lamp could explode when overheated, sending glass shards flying with dangerous force. While Mythbusters demonstrated that an explosion was possible, they didn't find a glass shard embedded in the torso of their human model, as Philip had experienced. However, their tests showed that the extreme heat from the stove caused the pressure inside the lamp to rise rapidly, making the explosion inevitable. Philip Quinn's story exemplifies how a moment of impatience can turn deadly. It underscores the importance of following safety guidelines and using household items correctly. While lava lamps are mesmerizing and beautiful, they are designed to function under specific conditions. When those conditions are ignored, even something as harmless as a decorative lamp can become dangerous. It was February 22, 2008, in Swansea, South Wales. A 34-year-old graphic design student, Adam Dealey, attended a photography exhibition at the Monkey Cafe nightclub. Originally from Birmingham, Adam had moved to Swansea to pursue his degree, working part-time at the club to support his studies. He wasn't working, but enjoying the event with his friends that night. Adam was known for his friendly personality and love of having fun. As the night went on, a spontaneous eating contest began among the attendees. It started as a light-hearted joke, seeing who could stuff the most fairy cakes, small sponge cakes, into their mouths. One person managed to fit 3, then another fit 4. Adam caught up, decided to join in, and attempted to cram 5 cakes into his mouth. However, things quickly took a serious turn. Adam realized he couldn't breathe and started choking. He walked towards the toilets, likely trying to spit out the cakes. Unfortunately, his friends initially thought he was still joking and didn't notice the severity of the situation. One of Adam's friends, Daniel Finselbach, noticed something was wrong and followed him to the toilets. There, he saw Adam convulsing, struggling to cough up the cakes. Daniel immediately attempted the Heimlich maneuver, trying to dislodge the food from Adam's throat. Despite his efforts, Adam collapsed and hit his head on the toilet. Paramedics were called immediately. They arrived within 10 minutes, but by then Adam had already gone into cardiac arrest. They rushed him to Singleton Hospital, continuing their attempts to revive him, but sadly, Adam was pronounced dead at 3:20 a.m. The news of Adam's death shocked everyone who knew him. Amanda Davey and Paul Dyke, the owners of the Monkey Cafe, were devastated. In a statement, they expressed their deep sorrow and offered condolences to Adam's family, calling it a tragic and avoidable accident. An inquest into Adam's death was held, confirming that the cause was choking due to the blockage of food in both his upper and lower airways. Dr. Maurizio Brotto, who performed the post-mortem, verified this. The coroner, Philip Rogers, recorded a verdict of misadventure, emphasizing the risks of such actions, saying, "It doesn't take me to say that trying to fit as much food in your mouth as possible is dangerous." During the inquest, it was revealed that Adam had been drinking that night and had about 1.5 times the legal drink-drive limit of alcohol in his system. However, Dr. Brotto explained that this level wouldn't have significantly impaired Adam's judgment, especially since he was used to drinking. The spontaneous nature of the cake-eating contest was a key point of discussion at the inquest. Stephen Jenkins, another attendee, explained how the contest started. There was a tray of cakes from the buffet. My friend tried to fit 3 cakes in his mouth, so I tried to beat him by putting 4 in mine. Adam heard about it and tried 5. I saw that he was struggling, but then he walked towards the toilets. Daniel Finzelbach, who had tried to save Adam, described what he witnessed. I saw Adam walk towards the toilets, his body convulsing. There was cake around his mouth, and he was struggling to breathe. I ran after him and slapped his back hard, then tried the Heimlich maneuver, but he collapsed. The coroner's ruling of misadventure highlighted the accidental nature of Adam's death. Philip Rogers stressed that activities involving large amounts of food are inherently dangerous and should be avoided. He also clarified that the bar staff did not organize the cake-eating contest, but was an impromptu act by the attendees. Adam's family was deeply affected by his sudden death. He was their only child, and his parents, Sandra and Robert, were too devastated to attend the inquest. The last time they had seen Adam was during a visit to his university in December, just 2 months before the tragedy. They were proud of their son and his plans to move to New Zealand after finishing his studies. The Monkey Cafe community also mourned Adam's death. Flowers and tributes were laid outside the cafe in his memory. Paul Cunningham, a sound engineer at the club, expressed his sorrow and urged others to be cautious with similar pranks, warning, "Don't play these games. They can end in tragedy." He described Adam as a kind person who is loved by everyone and will be greatly missed.
It was a cold night in 2004, and the world was under a global health crisis. Taiwan, like many countries, was battling severe acute respiratory syndrome, or SARS, a deadly virus that had claimed hundreds of lives. Amidst this, a 45-year-old woman, terrified of getting sick, took drastic measures. She believed that soaking in a bathtub filled with 40.5% ethanol would protect her from the virus. Unfortunately, her attempt to shield herself had fatal consequences. Around 11 p.m., the woman filled her bathtub with ethanol and got in, thinking it would act as a barrier against SARS. Her family, unaware of her actions, went about their night. By the next morning, they found her in the tub, lifeless. It was 11 a.m., and it was already too late. At first glance, there seemed to be nothing unusual about her death. Her head was above the ethanol, and there were no signs of trauma or drowning. Investigators found no evidence of drugs, and her stomach was empty, ruling out alcohol ingestion. Yet her blood alcohol concentration, or BAC, was an alarming 1.35%. To put it in perspective, a BAC of 0.4% can be lethal. So how did she end up with such a high BAC without drinking? The answer was skin absorption. Normally, the skin doesn't absorb enough alcohol to cause harm. But in this case, the woman had been immersed in the ethanol for nearly 12 hours. Over time, her body absorbed a significant amount of alcohol through her skin. On top of that, she likely inhaled alcohol vapors, speeding up the process. As her BAC rose, the alcohol began affecting her central nervous system. By the time her BAC reached 0.1% to 0.2%, she was likely disoriented and unable to move. She probably couldn't climb out of the bathtub, leaving her trapped as her body continued to absorb more alcohol. Eventually, her BAC reached the fatal level of 1.35%. When her family found her, there was nothing they could do. This rare case stunned the medical community. Alcohol poisoning through skin absorption is almost unheard of in adults. However, the woman's extended exposure to ethanol and her decision to use such a high concentration created a dangerous situation. Researchers who examined the case estimated she absorbed about 1.5 liters of ethanol, enough to kill her. The SARS outbreak triggered widespread fear, leading people to take extreme measures to protect themselves. In Taiwan, over 660 cases of SARS have been reported, and 73 people have died. The woman, like many others, was caught up in the panic, but her desperate attempt to avoid infection ended in tragedy. Sadly, this case is not unique. During times of crisis, people often resort to dangerous methods out of fear. For example, during the COVID-19 pandemic, some people ingested or injected harmful substances in an attempt to protect themselves from the virus. Following the woman's death, public health officials urged the public to avoid unverified remedies. The World Health Organization, WHO, clarified that while alcohol-based hand sanitizers effectively kill germs, the amount of alcohol absorbed through the skin during regular use is safe. They warned against bathing in alcohol or using it in unsafe ways. This case reminds us of the dangers of misinformation and panic. In her attempt to protect herself from SARS, the woman inadvertently put herself at even greater risk. Her death was a tragic, preventable outcome, underscoring the importance of following reliable, science-backed advice during health crises. 23, 2017, in the small coastal village of Kuala Sanglang, northern Malaysia. The Nine Emperor Gods Festival, a major Taoist celebration, was in full swing, and crowds gathered to witness various rituals, including one performed by Lim Ba, a famous Taoist medium. Known for his extreme physical endurance, Lim, who was 68 years old, had become a local legend through his ritual known as human steaming. In this act, he would sit inside a large metal wok and endure being steamed alive, showcasing his spiritual strength. Lim had captivated his followers with this dangerous ritual for over a decade. Many saw it as a powerful symbol of faith, and it had drawn crowds to witness Lim's perceived invulnerability. However, his family was deeply concerned. Lim had undergone heart surgery the previous year, and his health had been in decline. His son Kang Huai and daughter Wei Ling had pleaded with him to stop. He was on medication for hypertension and hadn't been feeling well leading up to the event. Despite their warnings, Lim insisted on going through with the performance. At 10 p.m., Lim took his usual position in the large wok. Sitting in a lotus pose, he clasped his hands in prayer, and a massive steel lid was placed over the top. The fire underneath began to heat the wok, and food items like corn, rice, and buns were steamed alongside him. It was both a religious ritual and entertainment to the audience as they watched the steam rise from the wok. Everything appeared normal initially, with Lim sitting calmly inside as he had done many times before. His previous record for enduring this was 75 minutes, and no one expected anything different this time. However, after 30 minutes, strange noises were heard from within the wok. What began as soft sounds soon became frantic banging. Lim, once calm, was now in distress. Panic spread through the crowd as Lim's son and others rushed to lift the lid. When the lid was finally removed, Lim was found unconscious with severe burns covering his face, hands, and body. He had gone into cardiac arrest, and although efforts were made to revive him, they were unsuccessful. Lim was pronounced dead at the scene, and the cause of death was determined to be a heart attack worsened by the burns he suffered. The news of Lim's death shocked the local community, where he had long been regarded as a spiritual leader who appeared almost invincible. However, his family had always feared this day would come. His son had expressed that they had repeatedly urged him to stop, knowing the risks, especially after his surgery. His daughter Wei Ling noted that although he cherished the admiration of his followers, the family constantly worried about his safety. Following Lim's death, the temple canceled all further performances out of respect. Taoist officials distanced themselves from the ritual, with some explaining that it wasn't part of mainstream Taoist practice, but rather a fa shu, a magic-like performance that tested physical endurance. Tan Ho Kio, president of the Federation of Taoist Associations of Malaysia, emphasized that while such feats could attract believers, they were dangerous and not recommended. Lim's death brought attention to the risks of extreme rituals. Malaysia, known for its religious diversity, has a long history of endurance-based religious acts. Still, this incident underscored the potential danger of pushing the body beyond its limits, even in the name of faith. For Lim's family, the grief was overwhelming. They had always been aware of the risks, but his devotion to his followers and belief in his spiritual strength had always outweighed their concerns. Wei Ling noted that he had been performing these rituals for so long that they never imagined it would end this way. In the end, many wondered why Lim continued the ritual despite his deteriorating health. Having undergone heart surgery and being on medication for hypertension, it was clear that his body was no longer capable of handling such extreme conditions. Nonetheless, his belief in the ritual's power and his determination to continue ultimately proved to be too much for his weakening body to endure, leading to his untimely collapse. It was a quiet Saturday evening on December 6, 2009, in the small town of Konotop, Ukraine. Vladimir Likonos, a 25-year-old chemistry student, was at home working at his computer. His parents were nearby, enjoying a peaceful evening. Vladimir had always been passionate about chemistry. Since he was a child, he had been fascinated by the mysteries of science, particularly math, physics, and chemistry. His love for these subjects led him to study at a regional branch of the Kyiv Polytechnic Institute, one of the most prestigious technical universities in Ukraine. He had dreams of becoming a scientist, and his time at university had only fueled his curiosity and ambition. Vladimir was known to be a quiet and level-headed young man. He spent most of his free time experimenting with various chemicals, often making homemade firecrackers. It was a hobby that reflected both his knowledge and passion for chemistry. But on this particular evening, something went horribly wrong. Vladimir had a peculiar habit. He liked to chew gum, but not just any gum. He had a habit of dipping it into citric acid. This was something he did regularly to prolong the gum's flavor. On this night, as he sat at his computer, he reached for his usual dose of citric acid to dip his gum into. But unbeknownst to Vladimir, he made a fatal mistake. On the table next to him were two containers. One contained citric acid as usual. The other contained a substance that looked very similar to citric acid, but it was something far more dangerous. Vladimir had been working with explosives for his studies, and on this night, he had some of the explosive powder on the table. In the dim light, or perhaps out of sheer habit, Vladimir dipped his gum into the wrong container. A loud explosion shattered the peaceful silence of the night. The sound was so loud that it could be heard throughout the house. Vladimir's mother, who was in another room, rushed to her son's room, only to find a horrifying scene. Vladimir was lying on the floor, his face bloodied and disfigured. The lower half of his face, including his entire jaw, had been blown off. It was a gruesome sight that even experienced police officers would later describe as one of the most shocking scenes they had ever encountered. Emergency services were called immediately. When the medical workers arrived, they tried to save Vladimir, but his injuries were far too severe. There was nothing they could do. Vladimir was dead. The police arrived shortly after. They quickly began to investigate what had happened. On Vladimir's work table, they found about 100 grams of a powder that resembled citric acid. But it wasn't citric acid. It was an explosive substance. The police realized that Vladimir had accidentally dipped his chewing gum into the explosive powder, mistaking it for citric acid. The scene was so disturbing that even the most experienced officers were shaken. They had seen many things in their careers, but nothing quite like this. A bomb squad was dispatched to the scene to determine the exact nature of the explosive substance. The powder was deemed too volatile to move, so the bomb squad had to carefully neutralize it on site. As the investigation continued, more details about Vladimir's life emerged. His friends and classmates described him as a brilliant student who was deeply passionate about his studies. He was home for the holidays, having just finished his semester exams. During this time, he spent most of his days at home, either on his computer or working on his experiments. Vladimir's parents were devastated by the loss of their son. They had always known about his passion for chemistry, but they never imagined it would lead to such a tragic accident. The town of Konotop was also in shock. News of the accident spread quickly, and people couldn't believe that something so terrible could happen in their quiet town. The authorities conducted further tests on the unknown substance found at the scene. They wanted to be sure of what had caused the explosion. The tests confirmed that the substance was indeed an explosive, though its exact composition remained unidentified. It was clear that Vladimir had made a fatal mistake, one that cost him his life. Vladimir was buried in the Alexandrovka Cemetery in Sumy, Ukraine, not far from where he had grown up. A single photograph of him remains on his Find a Grave memorial, capturing the image of a young man who had so much potential, a life full of promise that was suddenly and violently ended. On May 15, 2011, 20-year-old Acton Beale from Brisbane, Australia, tragically lost his life while participating in the internet craze called planking. Planking is a trend where people lie face down in unusual or risky places while someone takes a photo, which is then shared online. The more dangerous or unusual the location, the more attention the photo receives. That night, Acton and a friend were returning home after a night out. Acton decided to try planking on the railing of his apartment's balcony. This railing was only 5 centimeters wide, making it extremely dangerous. As he attempted to lie down on the railing, he lost his balance and fell 7 stories to the ground. Despite the efforts of paramedics who tried to revive him for 20 minutes, Acton was pronounced dead at the scene. The incident shocked the community and led to widespread media coverage. Deputy Police Commissioner Ross Barnett confirmed that Acton had been drinking before the accident. He also stated that planking itself wasn't the issue, but doing it in dangerous places like a high balcony was extremely risky. Barnett pointed out that while planking on a park bench might be harmless, trying it on a narrow ledge high above the ground could be fatal. Following Acton's death, police and government officials issued warnings about the dangers of planking. Queensland Police, for example, warned that those caught planking in dangerous locations or on private property could face legal consequences. They emphasized that while planking might seem like harmless fun, the risks involved in extreme cases were too high. Acton's death also sparked a heated debate online, especially on social media. A Facebook page created in his memory was flooded with comments, both in support of and against the trend. Some people expressed their condolences and remembered Acton as a fun-loving young man, while others criticized planking and those who encouraged it. The situation became so tense that the page's comments section had to be shut down after people began posting defamatory remarks and even sharing a video mocking Acton's death. The video was later removed from YouTube. The tragedy also caught the attention of Australian Prime Minister Julia Gillard, who described the incident as really tragic. She emphasized the need for people to think about their safety first before engaging in risky behavior, even if it's just for fun. Acton's death was believed to be the first planking-related fatality in Australia, and it raised concerns that it might not be the last. As more people attempted to outdo each other with increasingly dangerous stunts, authorities feared that there would be more injuries or deaths. The Queensland Police even issued a general warning on their Facebook page, cautioning people about the potential dangers of planking as it gained popularity. Despite the warnings, the planking trend continued to grow. The Planking Australia Facebook page, which had over 55,000 followers before Acton's death, saw a surge in popularity, reaching over 87,000 followers shortly after the incident. The page featured photos of people planking in various locations, from park benches to railway tracks, and even on top of police cars. Before Acton's death, another 20-year-old man from Queensland had been arrested for planking on a police car. He was charged with trespassing, and authorities warned that similar stunts could result in fines or even jail time. They also emphasized that while people might see planking as a fun activity, they needed to be aware of the risks and the potential consequences of their actions. Acton's death shows the dangers associated with internet trends that encourage risky behavior. While planking might have started as a harmless game, it quickly escalated into something much more dangerous as people pushed the limits to gain attention online. On March 24, 1975, Alex Mitchell, a 50-year-old bricklayer from Kings Lynn, Norfolk, had a day like any other. After finishing work, he came home for dinner, eager to relax in front of the TV. His favorite show, The Goodies, was on that night. The episode was titled Kung Fu Capers, a comedy sketch that promised a lot of laughs. The Goodies was a popular British comedy show, known for its silly and sometimes bizarre humor. That night's episode featured a scene where a character dressed as a Scotsman used bagpipes as a weapon in a mock martial arts fight against another character wielding a black pudding. The scene was absurd and hilarious, and Alex found it incredibly funny. As he sat in his living room, he started to laugh, and he kept laughing. Minutes passed, and Alex's laughter didn't stop. He laughed for 25 minutes straight, unable to control himself. His laughter echoed through the house, and his wife Nessie watched in surprise. But then something went terribly wrong. As Alex let out one last laugh, he suddenly collapsed on the sofa. His laughter had stopped, and so had his heart. Alex Mitchell died that evening from heart failure, right there in his living room. The doctors believed that his uncontrollable laughter had triggered a heart attack or stroke. It was an unbelievable way to go, and his story quickly made headlines. The idea that someone could die from laughing seemed almost impossible, yet it had happened. In the days following Alex's death, his widow Nessie reached out to the cast of The Goodies. Despite the tragedy, she wanted to thank them for making her husband's final moments so joyful. She wrote them a letter expressing her gratitude for the laughter they brought into his life. For years, Alex Mitchell's death was a mystery. It wasn't until 37 years later that a possible explanation emerged. In May 2012, Alex's granddaughter, Lisa Cork, suffered a near-fatal cardiac arrest at the age of 23. She was put into a medically induced coma, and after extensive testing, doctors diagnosed her with long QT syndrome. Long QT syndrome is a genetic disorder that affects the heart's electrical activity. It can cause sudden irregular heartbeats, which can lead to fainting, seizures, or even sudden death. The syndrome is often triggered by intense emotions or physical exertion. In Lisa's case, it was likely the cause of her cardiac arrest. Given Lisa's diagnosis, doctors began to re-examine Alex Mitchell's death. They suspected that he too might have had long QT syndrome, which would explain why his heart failed during a fit of laughter. The condition can be inherited, so it's possible that the gene was passed down through the family. This new information brought some clarity to the Mitchell family. It also prompted them to get tested for the syndrome to prevent any future tragedies. Lisa was fitted with an internal cardiac defibrillator to help regulate her heartbeat, and other family members were tested to see if they carried the same gene. While Alex Mitchell's death remains one of the strangest in medical history, it is also a reminder of how fragile life can be. Laughter is usually a good thing, but in rare cases it can be deadly, especially for those with underlying health conditions.